Where were you at? You went somewhere, didn't
I
you?
went to Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. Yeah, I have two uncles that live and work there with their families, so I went to visit them. I met like some cousins I've never, met
Oh,
before in
yeah,
my
yeah. One of
life,
those
and
trips. Yeah,
yeah, one
that's
of those
cool.
trips. Yeah. As
Yeah.
soon as I landed, they were like, "Teach us boxing." They had focus mitts ready, gloves, and they right off the plane. Jet lag be damned. They were like, "Teach us boxing," and so I taught a lot of my cousins boxing for like a week straight, and
You were
they
there for a
loved it.
week.
I was there for about 9 days total.
How was it overall? Just
It was just such a different culture, so interesting. It's like no alcohol there, so when you walk around downtown at like 3 in the morning, there's kids and families walking around because
oh yeah,
there's
yeah.
not like stumbling drunk people and there's no like lewdness or anything like that.
That's always
So
good.
yeah, it was very,
Yeah.
very interesting. Coffee shops are open till like 4 or 5 in the morning.
What?
Restaurants, like chain restaurants, are open till like 2 or 3 in the morning. Just a
Yeah.
completely different culture.
Yeah. Riyadh is where they're doing all the like the UFC stuff
The night,
and
the
WWE too, I think goes there.
Yep, boxing has been there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Number 7. Yep. Are we keeping all that in there or was it recording? Nice.
There you
I
go.
just keep everything in there. But yeah, I think UFC goes there. WWE's going there, surprisingly, but damn, I'm jealous.
It was fun, man. The last night I was there was a UFC event where Israel Adesanya fought, and where he was knocked out. I don't know if you, thank you, where if you happen to see that.
Oh
But
yeah, that was
that
yeah,
was in
yeah.
Riyadh. That was in Saudi Arabia.
Oh.
Yeah.
I totally like. Not only did I not hear about it for some reason, but it was at like
It was in the morning.
noon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was at
Yes.
10
So I got
a.m.
my Carlson Gracie like Muay Thai group text. People all of a sudden start freaking out. I'm like, what are you
Yeah, it was kind of a shock.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just got dropped.
It was
Yeah.
insane, man, and
I
just
felt bad.
me too. Me too. Like to see that. It's always sad to see that kind of like fall from great. For a while you're invincible. That's just fighting.
He
though.
looked fine too the whole fight,
He
but
was
then
doing
just
well.
Yeah, he just got caught.
overhand right, I think it was, or something, or like a
Yeah,
straight right.
big
one of
shot,
those,
and he switched stances right in front of him. He didn't give enough distance. Izzy likes to switch stances constantly. And when you do that, you need to create distance because you kind of reset. You like switch stances, you reset. So that guy attacked during the reset
Yeah.
period. So yeah,
Well, they were saying the eye poke too had something to do with it. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I did. I'm sure it did. I'm sure it did.
Yeah, because he was like, "Oh, I'm good," and then he just got clocked. And then,
Yep.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it is what it is. Yeah, it's like seeing that because he was. I mean, he was just what 2 years ago the champion,
Yeah,
and then now he's what lost. Is it
3 in a row or something like that. Which is
Strickland,
Yep.
DDP, and then
and now this. Yeah, 3 in a row.
which I don't even know much about. What was his name? The guy that beat
It's the
him.
first time I'd ever seen him fight. to
See,
be
I
honest.
feel so
Yeah.
bad because
Me
he
too.
just
Me too.
he completely dismantled Izzy. He didn't dismantle him, but he did, a clean knockout.
Yeah.
So, but now his name is, all up there now in the rankings. So good for him. But yeah, poor Izzy. He's one of my favorites too.
I like anyone with an interesting, unique style, right? We see a lot of cookie cutter, like, average or above average striking, above average grappling, above average wrestling. And it's like this hybrid MMA style, which is great.
Yeah.
But I like the fighters like Izzy who have their own unique style. And that's what makes those fighters interesting. And that's what makes them garner
Yeah.
a lot of fan support.
And he's flashy. He's not flashy. He's very just he's a showman.
Yeah, he's a showman.
And people like that. As much as we, people don't admit it, it is fun to watch someone entertaining.
It is.
That
It
fights.
is.
Instead of like boring like wrestling all the time. It's not boring.
No, I know
I
what you
we
mean.
appreciate it.
Sure,
but,
sure.
yeah, it's fun to watch people that try to entertain the crowd, I guess, but
Exactly.
also are still very technical when it's needed. What was your style of fighting when you fought?
I really,
MMA?
I liked so 2 of my pro wins came by leg locks in the first round, a heel hook and a toe hold. I really liked going for leg locks, especially when I was fighting. They were still considered like taboo. Like leg locks were, at traditional jiu-jitsu gyms, they didn't teach leg locks till you were like a purple or brown belt because they felt they were dangerous. But how silly, like we could choke each other and, kimura each other and arm lock each other, but some reason leg locks are too dangerous.
Yeah.
It just had a weird stigma around it. So I went for them a lot because people's defense wasn't really there at that point. I liked striking. I didn't like to get hit. I was like a striker who didn't like to get hit. Very similar to a Machida type striker. A lot of movement. I don't know. I just had like a very free-flowing, fun, loose style. I liked watching guys like Dominic Cruz, if you remember him.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
for
I was
sure.
inspired a lot by those kind of lighter guys that moved around a lot, had a fluid movement. I thought that was fun. That way I wouldn't create patterns that my opponent could recognize. So it was kind of like controlled chaos, so to speak. So
Yeah.
I really liked fighting in that style.
So yeah, Dominic was fun to watch too. 'Cause
He was so
he was
fun.
all over the place. Yeah. And what happened to him? Is he retired now? No, he's still there.
I saw him fight. I remember he lost to Henry Cejudo, but even before that, like in the later stages of his career, he was doing very, very well.
No, he was a man.
Yeah, I really like watching him fight.
But yeah. Art of Wellness, episode 7. We got Coach Ramy again, back by super popular demand.
I'm here.
Thanks for doing this again.
Of course, my pleasure.
Second episode with you. Lots of more nuts and bolts in injury prevention, training for MMA, boxing. I want to talk about all that stuff, but I wanted to start with what you feel the biggest misconceptions are about training for combat sports.
So one of the biggest ones, which we touched on briefly in the last, actually we talked about this. But,
yeah, we did. We talked about that.
Sparring, right? Which is like hard sparring, needing to constantly bash your brain in to prepare for a fight. There's a misconception that you can spar to simulate a fight. Nothing is like a fight, right? You can't spar to simulate a fight. And that's where MMA is lacking. If you see other high-level sports, like let's say basketball, you see NBA teams, they're not constantly just having scrimmages or playing games to practice. They do drills, they have control.
Yep.
It's a scientific approach, where MMA is still in such an early stage. The training isn't as scientific yet. And the teams and coaches that do have a more focused and organized approach to training tend to have better results than the old school, like, okay, let's just get in there and see who's the toughest, right?
Right.
That doesn't lend itself well to having longevity in the sport. Another one is that you have to train through injury no matter what. Like, no matter how serious the injury is, you have to show up, and it's all mental. And
we'll talk about that.
Yeah. So that's something we should definitely chat about.
I mean, we can talk about it now, honestly. So pain, like, how do you deal with a fighter? We talked about it a little bit last time, but how do you distinguish between it's a pain that you feel they should sit out or maybe go see somebody about, or it's just pain they could train through? This is something I'll kind of go back and forth on with you.
Yeah, because I'd love to hear your opinion. Personally, so let's say somebody's hand hurts. If somebody's hand hurts, I feel like they should still train because we could train your other hand. So if your left hand hurts, let's work your right. Let's work your footwork. So something like that, I think we should train around. That's my opinion. I'm curious to hear what you think. But if it's something like your back is really messed up, or your knees are really giving you issues, stuff like that, it's more delicate. It's tougher for me as a coach to train around more serious injuries.
Yeah.
I have one student named Sophie. She was an athlete. I believe she played volleyball and basketball growing up, and she's about to have her first kickboxing fight.
Oh, cool.
In March, alongside with 5 of her teammates. And sometimes during practice, her knee would kind of just like pop out, and it was an old injury. So we'd be doing like stuff not that intense, movement, maybe sparring, and not even going that hard, and her knee will pop out of place, and she'll be in excruciating pain. So I told her to start wearing like compression gear, and that has been helpful. But stuff like that is tricky for me because I'm not a doctor. I don't know if I should say, hey, sit out for a month, or that is like the challenge. I feel like coaches
I like
have.
that. I mean, she should definitely see a physical therapist like myself.
I agree.
So has she had that recently? Do you still train her, you said?
She's my student now.
Okay.
And she's, for the past, like, I would say month or so, we haven't had any issues with her knee. But it's happened twice while I was there, maybe more so while I wasn't there. Twice while I was there, I've seen her knee, like I've seen her be in pain because of her knee. And it's from an old injury. Nothing we have done caused that injury, but of course, through training for combat sports and the unpredictability of the movement, it can aggravate her old injury.
I would say she definitely needs physical therapy. So I'd be more than happy to check her out. But, pain's kind of weird because I always say pain is strange. I mean, especially in your shoes, if you're a coach and you see somebody struggling with pain, and especially the fighter, they're telling you, your student, they're saying like, hey, this is kind of weird when I kick or when I punch. I would say send them to me right away, honestly, just to see what's going on. If there's any like red flags that they need to be checked out or need an imaging, like MRI, X-ray, whatever. And pain. The way I explain it is, in the clinic with me, is if pain is lower than a 5 out of 10 with exercise that I'm giving them, we could work through it. If it's higher than a 5 out of 10, you might need to modify some things, back off of that activity, and then we'll come back to it.
I see.
Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, but regardless, if you guys are like, you're not sure whether they need to see somebody, have them see somebody.
Yeah.
I would just go with that.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
What are injuries you think that people shouldn't train around? Like, what are there any specific injuries that you've come across where you're like, okay, you should not be training with this type of injury?
Let me think of an example. I mean, back is a good one, but it depends. It depends how severe the pain is, what their range of motion is, their strength, how they're presenting. Usually, let me think of somebody that recently I had. Jiu-jitsu guy with, I think he said like 7 out of 10 back pain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it wasn't super high. I mean, it's high enough, but he had pain with twisting, with bending, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, in jiu-jitsu, you're like twisting yourself up in a pretzel
Right,
sometimes.
right.
So I would say for him, let's back off of the activity. We'll come back to it. The physical therapy process is essentially we back off a few things. We don't stop it if needed, but we modify it, back off if needed. We treat the area with certain, hands-on stuff,
Right.
rehab exercises, targeted rehab exercises. Let the pain desensitize, kind of settle, and then gradually reintroduce that activity again as
Makes
a form
sense.
of graded exposure. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
once the pain has subsided or has gone down to like a 2 or a 1, we start reintroducing that same motion that hurt them in the beginning.
I see. I see.
So
Okay.
and it's therapy. It's a process.
Right.
We build them back up to do that irritating activity again.
I see.
So and then when
I
they do it
see.
again, when they throw a punch, like initially maybe a punch would hurt them.
Right.
Hurt their shoulder. They go through the whole PT process. They throw a punch with me in the clinic. They're like, hey, Jerry, it doesn't hurt anymore. We keep doing it. We keep building up their tolerance, pain-free, send them right back to the coach, the whoever, the
see,
trainer.
okay.
That's the whole process in a nutshell. But yeah, that's what people need to be doing if they
Right.
feel like, something's kind of bugging them. So
Yeah.
I would say for you, if somebody is even concerned about something, just text me, and I'll be there to check them out. So
No, I appreciate that, man. I
Yeah.
should take you up on that because that's something we're dealing with all the time. Small injuries to more significant stuff, and it's always a question as a coach because as you're not a doctor, as many coaches like to pretend they are experts, in the human body. Yeah, we might know some stuff from our experience, but that's not our area of expertise. So yeah, that's always I think a tricky thing for coaches managing injuries. And your students think you know everything. They'll come to you, hey, this hurts, and it's like, I do not know what to tell you, right? And
Yeah.
that's when people like you are so valuable because that's not our area of expertise. If you've
Yeah.
trained Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu for 20 years, it doesn't mean you're an expert on managing injuries. You
Right.
might have some anecdotal stuff that you've picked up along the way, but it doesn't replace actual knowledge and expertise.
Right. And, like I said, if you feel like someone's just has something, just, send them to me and I'll check them out for sure. Is there somebody recently, well, besides her, anybody else that you noticed that, maybe you have to like train around certain things or a different example you could give us?
Yeah, I have a student named Wilkie. He's a great student.
Shout out to Wilkie.
Shout out to Wilkie. And he had like a bone spur in his foot that had to be removed. He basically had like an extra bone in his
Yeah.
foot, right?
Okay, yeah,
And he
I've
had to
seen plenty of
remove
those.
it through surgery.
Yeah.
And now he's coming back. He's been able to do kickboxing, jiu-jitsu,
good.
everything, which I've been really impressed by because he had his surgery in November and I was training him yesterday in jiu-jitsu and he was rolling and everything. But for quite a while, he couldn't train at all, like directly after the surgery. He came back and did, modified stuff. And that's the cool thing, like about having a small private gym is that I could take him to the side, work drills, ask him, hey, is this aggravating your injury? Is this hurting? And we slowly worked our way back up to now where he's boxing, kickboxing,
good.
and doing jiu-jitsu actually.
Awesome.
With no issues so far. So, you're always worried about somebody coming back from a surgery and you don't want them to be missing training for like 2 or 3 months.
Yep.
And, they're always eager to get back into it. So you have to be, on one hand, I'm so excited when students want to come back to training right after an injury. That's the best thing as a coach, to have a student with that mentality.
Yep.
But you don't want to be pushing that in the case that they could hurt themselves further and now you're responsible.
That's that line we have to toe
Right.
because, if you keep picking at the scab, so to speak, of, you keep irritating that injured area, you're not letting it heal properly. So, and that's our job is if somebody gets surgery and they're not sure they can go back to MMA, jiu-jitsu, boxing, kickboxing, whatever, I was talking to Melanie about this last podcast, is we're the buffer between, the surgical process and getting them back into their sport. So like we make sure we make them hit all these goals and milestones in order to send them right back to you to tell you, hey, he's ready, he or she is ready to go.
Right.
They could throw a kick now, they could throw a punch, they could grapple, they could clinch, they could do whatever, pain free. We've tested it in the clinic. He or she is good to go. So
I see.
Yeah, we're
see.
we're that buffer between that process, because some people just get surgery and they try to get right back into, well, hopefully not a lot these days,
Right.
but you get the odd person that's like, oh, yeah, I had surgery, let me just jump back into my sport, or a minor procedure or whatever, and they still have pain, or they still, something doesn't feel right.
Right.
That's when we come in and we make it feel like normal again, and then send them back to the sport. So
that makes sense.
hopefully that makes sense. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so training and injuries kind of go hand in hand. It's hard to, we talked about it before, it's hard to kind of train hard and also not have some sort of stuff bugging you.
Sure.
But, and you mentioned injury management last podcast too, whereas you can't really prevent injury, but we could do our best. And this is where, I talk about prehab or prehabilitation comes in, which is essentially being proactive in your injury prevention, or trying to prevent injuries in the future. Prehab meaning, certain mobility work, targeted strengthening exercises, correcting movement patterns to reduce the risk of injury in the future. It's kind of being proactive with hopefully not letting something happen in the future. So do you guys do any prehab work? You guys warm up and stuff, right?
Sure.
So,
yeah. We do a extensive warm up that consists of several rounds of activity that gradually increases in intensity, so that by the time the main portion of practice has started, everyone is warm, is loose, their body is warm, and we've had very few injuries in our practices. And I think that having a good extensive warm up has been like a really good thing for us. It's really helped us prevent injury.
Yeah.
I was thinking, as you say this, a business idea for you.
Yeah.
You should create like a prehab like guide for combat sports athletes.
Yeah, I know.
Man.
There's a lot of stuff I want to do.
That would be such a great resource. I really mean that for coaches, and especially from doctors like yourself who are more knowledgeable about combat sports. So there's the trust, right? Because sometimes there's also a lot in mixed martial arts and combat sports where we don't trust certain doctors for maybe bad experiences that we've had with our athletes, recommending surgery that they don't need, pushing prescription medication that might not be the best case scenario for that athlete. We touched on that last time.
Yeah.
I know you're afraid of the pharmaceutical reps coming after you. Me too.
We both are. Yeah. We'll just disappear.
Exactly. Yeah. Suicide by a gunshot to the back of the head, right?
Yeah. But, it's important though to talk about this stuff. But anyways, flexibility and mobility in a fighter, I want to talk about too. So, how important do you think it is? And I'll kind of give you my take on it. Because a fighter is different than like different sports have different demands in people. Where, a kickboxer needs to throw a high kick and they need some good hip mobility, hip flexibility, all that good stuff. So how important is it for you think, to be flexible and mobile enough to be a fighter?
So important.
Super important, right?
So important. So it's so underrated as like a physical, attribute for a fighter to have. Because I noticed the fighters that are flexible and mobile usually have less injuries and they could perform techniques more efficiently. So like fighters with really tight hips, they could probably throw a high kick because they have enough like active flexibility to get that leg up there, but they have to use way more effort to get that high kick up there. Whereas people who come to me very flexible, their high kicks, their triangle chokes tend to be more efficient and effortless because of that base that they have of being very flexible and having mobility. So I think it's not focused on enough. There is a big emphasis on things like strength, speed, power, right?
Which is important too.
Very important, right? Very important. But we've also seen some of the greatest fighters in history not have a lot of power, from Muhammad Ali, Khabib is in one punch knocking people out on the feet. A lot of fighters don't have that talent, that, natural talent of having very heavy hands, and they've still excelled at the highest. I mean, Anderson Silva, he knocks people out, but he's not he's not like a Jeremy Stevens. He's not like a Mike Tyson. He's not one of those people that just close their eyes, swing, and then you're done for. But flexibility, I think that also helps fighters have longer, healthier careers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, flexibility, mobility. I mean, shoulder mobility. I mean, just going down the list, like shoulder mobility, you need to be mobile in your shoulders to throw a punch,
Right, right.
to grapple, to clinch somebody, for takedowns,
Mm-hmm.
guard transitions, all that stuff. Ankle and knee flexibility is important for, changing directions, your footwork, all
Yes.
that stuff. And hopefully, I don't know how coaches are these days. We talked about it before, but hopefully
Right.
they're focusing on these things to help the fighter, be more mobile and flexible to throw a kick, to throw an effective punch, because that's their job.
Yes, exactly right.
So I think it's extremely important as well. But yeah, I mean, most of that stuff, people don't want to do it though. They
It's
just
not as
want
fun.
to. It's not as fun. They just
No.
want to start throwing kicks and punches.
Exactly.
So, how
Not
much
as
time do
fun.
you think you dedicate to that yourself as a fighter?
Good question. I think I always urge fighters. I'm like, hey, listen, while you're doing something else. Let's say you're watching TV, you're watching a movie. This is a good time. You're already just sitting. This is a good time to work on things like mobility. I know, like in PE, like let's say in our schools, we learned just a horrible way to stretch. We'd be cold
Terrible.
and we'd start static stretching, right?
Terrible.
Probably injuring ourselves left and right and decreasing our overall flexibility, I would
Yep.
imagine. Is that true?
It's not helping. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's not good for I mean, the whole strength and conditioning world always says static stretching before, a power sport or whatever will affect your power output during the sport. So, will it really, if you static stretch like crazy before a sport, it's probably not the best idea. You could
Okay.
do it a little bit. It's
Right.
fine. But there's better ways to warm up for a sport than just,
Right.
stretching out your hamstrings like this for 30
Yes,
seconds.
yes, I
Yeah.
agree. I know it's like before kicks, like active stretch, like
Yep,
for
dynamic
example,
stretching.
like dynamic stretching,
got it.
right? Like kicking your leg up with like a straight leg high up into the
Yep.
air. I see that having better results than people who hold static stretches for long periods of time. And I know personally because I did that every day in junior high school, and I was not flexible at all after 15 years of stretching
flexible
every
now?
day. I'm more flexible now, but the injuries that I've that I have through combat sports have done things like tighten my hip. So I have areas of my body that are very flexible, but it's not balanced.
Have you had
certain areas-
surgeries? I don't think have we talked
No,
about
I
this?
had I broke my ankle in several places when I was really young, like a teenager.
Okay, not with
And I
fighting, though.
But not with fighting.
Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
no.
So no like surgeries from fighting? Ever?
No
Okay.
surgeries from fighting. No.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, but things like people holding submissions a little too long, and now when people apply that same submission, I tap earlier than my 16-year-old student who you try to get him in a key lock or a Kimura and he doesn't tap, and you're almost like tapping before him while you're applying the submission. You're like, are you sure you're okay? I have a student named Pedro. Shout out to Pedro. Him and his mom got
We're gonna
me
shout
this
everybody out.
beautiful. Yeah, today's the shout out
You wanna,
episode.
give us
check this out.
the
Pedro
tour of
and
that
Karina,
cup?
thank you so much for this beautiful mug with my beautiful self on it. Thank you very much. Pedro is I think he's 16 now, 15 or
Okay.
16. He's so flexible. So when we're drilling, I'll use him like as a demonstration part. Okay, and here you're applying the Kimura, and he's not tapping, and I'm like, anybody else, I want to
Would
tap
tap.
just looking at it,
Ooh,
right?
yeah.
So he is so flexible that applying submissions on him is actually challenging. So I see what a benefit it is to be flexible. Like you could literally hold off longer in a competition. He might get out of a submission just by the person giving up because thinking, okay, this doesn't work on him. He is that flexible.
Wow.
He's like Gumby.
Good for him.
Whereas me, because of years of maybe wear and tear, so somebody applies a Kimura, especially in training, I'm going to tap pretty early. I feel it much earlier,
Right.
despite my experience, than someone like Pedro, who's
Yeah.
so flexible.
Yeah. So it's definitely important, super important.
For sure.
Going back to like fighters with pain, when you identify a fighter who you feel has too much pain to continue,
Yeah.
how do you handle a fighter who doesn't want to take time off for an injury? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough because good fighters usually always want to be training. I always
That's what I'm
tell
saying,
that's
yeah.
it's so tough because I always tell when I see people being lazy and not training, I remind them that your job as a fighter is actually to train. Fighting is the end result, but your job, your day-to-day is to train, right? You're not fighting 7 days a week. You're fighting maybe 3 times a year. So really, what is your day-to-day job? Your focus is training. So when you tell them you can't do that anymore, that just like it's a soul crushing thing, right? Because it's their identity, it's part of their personality, it's part of who they are, and now you've removed that. So we have to keep them engaged in combat sports in some way, this might be a good time to film study, maybe to watch people with similar body types to you.
Yep.
Let's pick up some techniques. Let's pick up some ideas, some things that they do well that you'd like to add to your arsenal.
Right.
Mike Tyson's coach used to have him watch film every day. He thought it was that important. That's something, again, you see that in football, basketball, film study that's assigned and required.
Yep.
Combat sports, how many fighters, even at the highest level, are required to study film? A lot of young fighters now don't know who, BJ Penn is. Even people just from like 15 years ago were at the top of the game, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's really important, and you could always be doing something to improve, even if it's not very physically challenging. So shadow boxing, just using your footwork, practicing your pivots. There's always something you can do, unless you're really debilitated and done for and, extremely injured. I think there's something you can do. So
Always.
that's like the way I try to spin it. Hey, it's not that you can't train. You just can't train the same as when you're healthy because you're injured right now, and we have to be smart. So, But I feel like there's always something you can do.
Always. Yeah. Even with, dealing with people, like, let's say someone comes in with me, they're post-surgical, whatever,
Right.
hip surgery, knee surgery, surgeons put them on a certain protocol to where we can't do certain things for a certain amount of weeks.
Right.
So, and I always tell patients, like, yeah, it's boring, for these next 4-6 weeks because we can't do much due to
Right.
your protocol and to your restrictions because of your surgery.
Yes.
But, during this time, we could work on other areas.
Right, right.
Make your weaknesses your strengths, maybe read more, focus on recovery more, manage your stress better, because all those things impact your pain too. So, like you said, I mean, when something's taken away from you, make something of it and focus on other areas of your life that you could improve on. So I see it all the time with people dealing with injuries is they can't do something for a while. So I'm like, all right, cool. Let's chill for a bit. Let's do some other stuff that we could make our strengths, and we'll come back to it stronger and better.
Right.
So that's a great way of putting it. So how do you think fighters mentally cope with injuries? Like, what's the mental game? Do you see it like in real time when somebody is just struggling and you're like, hey man, let's relax for a little bit. It's okay.
Absolutely. You see the toughest people, I've seen people break down in tears once they realize they're injured and maybe they can't compete when they had a competition, set, let's say, hey, we're set to compete in 2 months. You get injured. You just see it is really tough. As a coach, I care so much about my students and my athletes. So it breaks my heart too, to see them feel like they're not accomplishing their goals. They see it as a big setback. But I think the more experience you get, the more you realize this is part of the game. Being injured, unfortunately, at some points, there's no fighter who has survived their career without an injury, without taking time off, without having to manage. And I think that's part of being a fighter.
Yeah.
I think being a fighter is very little about, being in that ring or that cage, because that's 15, 10, 12, 20 minutes, right? So 99.9% of your time is all this other stuff, from selling tickets to promoting yourself on social media to dealing with injuries, this stuff that there's not really like a guidebook how to do this stuff, right? So again, that's where your coach should be more than just an instructor teaching you how to punch and kick. Your coach hopefully has competed and has dealt with these types of situations themselves, so they could pass on their experience to their athletes. And that's why it's so important to have coaches who have been there and done that. Doesn't mean they need to be a UFC champion, but if you had a fighting career or you competed significantly, which I think all coaches should, even if they lost every single fight they ever had.
0-20.
Hey, you've been there. You have a lot of experience to pass on to your students. In fact, there was a team in London, Ontario, Canada called Team Tompkins, and the head coach was Sean Tompkins, and he trained Sam Stout, Mark Hominick. I don't know if you remember these names. These were great
Classic
fighters
guys,
back in the day. The coach himself was 0-5 as a pro MMA fighter, Sean Tompkins.
Wow.
Yet he had several fighters fight at, championship level.
Yeah.
And he was an experienced, he's at least been there 5 times, more than the
more than the average
typical,
person,
I love kickboxing coach or whatever, who's never even, been close to a ring before, right? I had to make fun of at least one gym today.
Keep going. That's fine. We'll keep calling them
I had a chain gym. I had people who work at a local chain gym. I won't mention the chain gym, but they unfollowed my gym after the last episode. I started posting the clips about it.
Really?
So,
Dang.
so I know they're watching this, so shout out to them. Here I am again, making fun of you. But it's true. I stand by it 100%. Combat sports is a very serious thing, and it should be taken seriously. Like, people are putting their health in your hands when you're a combat sports coach.
Yep.
So I don't think you should be a pretender coaching people to do something real, right? You need real experience, right? Like, imagine going to a doctor, like, hey, I've never had patients before, but I've watched a lot of Grey's Anatomy, so I'm ready.
I got my YouTube PhD or whatever.
Exactly,
my
right.
Google Doc, yeah.
So, no, I stand by that and let people be offended. I'd rather people be offended than have athletes trusting in these coaches and then they get hurt and then they get disappointed. So, yeah, back to your main point, you see it. You see the emotional impact of injuries on fighters, and I think coaches are unqualified therapists, we're unqualified doctors, we're unqualified everything, right? As well as coaches. So I think the best coaches know how to kind of pick you up when you're down, help motivate you, help you see this is part of the game. It happens. So
I mean, it's tough to deal with people, but it's what we do and we love it. So
for sure,
recovery in fighters. I mean, people in the health and wellness area love talking about recovery these days. We got people with the sauna stuff, cold plunge people, red light people, all that good stuff, all that sciencey, fancy, tricky stuff. What is do fighters or your students ask you about recovery ever? And what do you tell them?
Yeah, they do. I know things that have worked for me. I like to do things like I like to go to the sauna at my gym. I like to do like heat therapy. I hate cold, so I've done the cold stuff. I hate it. I would rather fight Khabib 10 days in a row than be in the ice
We are
bath.
more warm weather people.
Yes, exactly right. So actually, when I was in Riyadh visiting my family in Saudi Arabia,
I'm so jealous you went there. By the way, I want to go so bad. Yeah.
At my cousin's fitness gym, they have a hot tub, and then right next to it is like a freezing cold, like
Oh, cool.
Yeah, like the cold version of a hot tub.
Yeah.
And he challenged me to go in it. And one thing I found really surprising was how difficult it was to breathe in it. You almost start hyperventilating when you're in there. It's like such a shock to your body. It was cool after. I felt awake, like you had 20 espresso shots, like you're just like wired and super alert. I don't know the science behind it, and I'm always worried about health trends. I remember for a while, everyone was doing like cryotherapy, right?
Yeah.
Everyone was doing and then everyone was doing this ice bath. Joe Rogan shows his old roided out ass jumping in hey, I do this every morning. Like Dana White was on an interview, when I go to a hotel, I make sure they have a cold plunge. I'm like, shut up. You're obviously on steroids or HGH or something, and that's why you look the way you do. I met Dana
you have?
I met him at UFC 43 when he was had the little like bit of hair. He had gap teeth. He was so polite. Oh, thank you for coming out. He was not the Dana we see today, right? He was much smaller and different person, right? And now he's like this health person giving health advice, and I'm always wary of that sort of thing. So you're the expert. What do you think about these trends and these? We see like waves, like cryo, cold plunges.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think, the usual, people don't like to hear this answer, but again, it's the basics never go out of style. So like the foundational stuff of recovery is still more important anyway. In the hierarchy of recovery, top three things I would say, based on science, is number one is sleep. Number two is most likely is nutrition. Number two, and then number three is load management or managing your training effectively, like progressing things in a smart manner, right? Like you don't want to be training full intensity every week. You're just killing yourself. You can't recover.
I see.
So if you got to get those things down first before adding in any red light therapy, plunging your balls or whatever people do, all that stuff. I'm not saying that stuff is bad. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying if people jump to those things and they're sleeping 4 hours a night and they're super stressed, I would throw stress in there too as number 4. So sleep, nutrition, load management or managing your training smart, and then managing your stress. If those things are just all over the place, you're going to feel like shit all the time, period. Sense. You could cryotherapy, you could cold plunge all you want. You're still going to feel like crap. So I would say get those things down first, which I would think most great athletes do. Then you can start adding in whatever you want to do. And if it feels good, keep doing it. It's fine. Maybe it's placeboing you or, a placebo effect.
Right.
That's fine too. As long as it's not hurting you and you feel like it's better for your recovery, do it. There's some good science on those things, but the best science is on those four things I just listed. which is again a sleep, nutrition, load management, and I would throw in managing your stress levels as well.
I like that a lot. It's so interesting, the similarities, because in combat sports, there's a similar way of thinking. You see every day, you see like on Instagram, you'll see like this cool new submission. But if you look at the statistics, the most commonly used submission to get a finish is the rear naked choke, the week one submission. After that, I believe it's like arm bar. So yeah, there's thousands of really cool, really exciting and flashy submissions, but the fundamentals, the basics, that's what carries you. And
Always.
And I feel that's kind of like, without being an expert, I always was a little doubtful or suspicious of these very trendy health things, because it's like, you're not telling people, like you said, to sleep, to eat well, to manage stress.
People don't like to hear that, but yeah.
Because it's not as glamorous, it's not as exciting. You know, people want to wear a gas mask and jump into an ice bath and, you know, do all this stuff. Yeah, like, oh, this is going to help me. It's like, you know, you slept 2 hours last night and you were drinking all week, and like, you don't need to do
eating
this.
Taco Bell every day. Yeah,
drink water and get 8 hours of sleep, and
trust me, you'll feel better. I don't know about you, but like if I sleep like 5 hours these days, like every night for a week, I'm dead.
I'm miserable.
I feel like crap. We're old men now.
Yeah, I'm miserable.
You know?
I'm miserable. I'll like be drinking way too much coffee, and it doesn't even have an effect at a certain point. I'm just like grumpy, and my appetite's all off. My decision
Everything's
making,
off. Your digestion's off. Everything goes off.
Man, I will hold off making important decisions. I'll be like, you know what, I didn't sleep well, and I have an important decision to make. I'm gonna get sleep and actually address this tomorrow, because I know that my cognitive ability, at least for myself, has suffered greatly. From lack of sleep. So yeah, I like that. You know, I think a lot of times these trendy things can be a Band-Aid. You know, they're not really focusing on what you really, really need to do. It's a Band-Aid, right? So
yeah. But again, you know, like I'm not trying to badmouth those things. I'm just trying to emphasize that having those 4 things down first, then you could add in, you know, those are more supplemental things, like supplements, you know, like taking whatever people take these days.
Right.
If you're eating like crap, you could take all the creatine you want, but, you know, it's not going to help that much, you know?
Yeah.
So get those things down first before, you know, jumping into gas mask cryotherapy, like you said. I don't know.
I'm just making stuff up. Yeah. I'm just winging it here.
I like that one. Is there any other like flashy recovery things you've seen? I'm trying to think of other ones.
Yeah, you know, the ones that have been prevalent lately have been like the red light therapy, the cold plunge has been all over the place. You know, it reminds me of in strength and conditioning, like 10 years ago, everyone just started doing battle ropes for everything and battle. And I'm like, those are cool.
I like battle ropes.
I like them too.
Yeah.
But it's just so funny. Like all of a sudden, everyone's just doing, I'm like, to get in shape for fighting, you need to spar, you need to shadow. But again, the basics. That is a cool thing you can add to your training regimen. But somebody put it, I forgot who said this, but they said, let's just make up a number. Let's say you have 20 hours a week to train. I'm making up this number. The fighter who spends 19 hours of those 20 working their actual skills that they'll be using in the ring or the cage will be better than the guy who spends 5 hours sparring, and then, you know, 10 hours on the really cool, trendy strength and conditioning stuff. We're not competing in CrossFit. We're competing in fighting, and skills pay the bills in fights. The best fighters are the most skilled. Sometimes they're not even in the best shape. I'm sure there's fighters who can outperform somebody like Anderson Silva in his prime when it comes to like bench press and sprints and vertical jumping, right? But his skills were incredible, right? Even when he was closer to 40 than 30, he was still beating people much younger, much bigger, much stronger because he had such great skills. So the more time you can dedicate to building and refining and sharpening your skills, the better. And that's why I worry about the trendy stuff, is it takes people's focus away. They almost market these things like it's a secret. Like, oh, this is the missing thing you need. It's like, no, you need a jab. You need you need a pivot. You need to keep your chin down. These things are more important. The other stuff is like icing on the cake, right?
Supplemental stuff, like I said, let's build the perfect fighter.
Okay.
So we talked about mobility, flexibility, right? Which is very important. What else would you throw in there? Endurance, probably, right?
Absolutely.
Not getting tired.
Absolutely.
How important is that, would you say?
Oh, man. You see fighters like Nick and Nate Diaz, who are not explosive, are not very fast, but their endurance allowed them to put a pace on their opponents that their opponents could not keep up with, especially in the later rounds. So endurance also gives you confidence. When you are fatigued in a fight, I know this personally, when you are fatigued, your confidence is shot. I remember
it's happened to you?
Oh, yeah. In one of my fights, it was my third pro fight at the end of the first round. And this was probably the fight I had done the most strength and conditioning for. Like, I worked with my strength and conditioning coach 2 or 3 times a week religiously. And I thought I was not going to get tired in the fight. After the first round of 5 minutes, I was like, how am I going to fight in the second round? I looked over, my opponent couldn't get up, and he ended up getting carried out in a stretcher. I was like, yes.
What?
Yes. And no one knew besides me that I was so exhausted. I was like, man, how am I even going to pick my hands up this round?
I thought you were going to say like he's already standing up over
no,
there. No,
thank goodness.
He was even worse than
thank
you.
goodness. We're doing push-ups or something.
He's standing up in the corner, like not breathing heavy. But
no, he was, I don't know. I beat the hell out of him that first round, luckily. So I looked over and he just wasn't getting up. And
was it from fatigue or damage?
For him, I think both, it was a mix of both.
Yeah.
I struck him quite a bit. It wasn't like anything crazy, but it was just an accumulation of strikes.
Okay, yeah.
I was very accurate.
Wow.
Yeah, with like.
So you've never had the opposite where you look over and that guy's just like ready to go. And
I
you're
have
dead
not.
tired.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
That's gotta suck.
I kept the poker face, so none of my teammates or coaches knew I was fatigued. So when I watch the video back now, that's a fight that's on YouTube too. It's Ramy Daoud versus. You could see.
Did we watch that last time?
No, we watched. I don't remember. Oh, we watched my fight when I was 17, my first ever amateur fight, I believe. Right when I was.
Can we pull that one up?
It's Ramy Daoud versus. He's a guy wearing pink polka dot shorts, so you won't. This guy's the only guy too who I've not become friends with after the fight. He kept like talking shit, wanted a rematch.
Well, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it was really still. I've been friends with every other one of my opponents. Including one who turned out to be a literal and then I, disassociated. That was sorry, this one, that's the shout out to no, I'm being very sarcastic. Yeah, maybe take that out. So people don't know, like, was Ramy no, the guy that for this fight was so it's me versus. Sometimes I'll say a comment like that. People will not know that I'm being sarcastic. They'll just
people, especially on YouTube.
Yeah, yep, exactly right.
Especially nowadays with people throwing up signs
clipped.
And stuff.
Yep, exactly.
We'll have to edit that out.
Yeah, so this is.
When was this? What year is this?
This was 2012, maybe
Wow.
November of 2012. And I watched all of his fights, and all of his fights, he immediately shoots for a takedown. And in this fight, he didn't. So I was shocked. I was just waiting for him to take me down. And because he's a wrestler, he didn't shoot. And so this round had a pretty good pace. Like there was not one moment of us just stalling or inaction. So the pace of this round really, really fatigued me. But luckily, he could not continue after this 5-minute round.
Wow.
I finally woke up and realized he wasn't going to take me down, so I initiated the clinch, closed distance. He landed good knees to my body, which fatigued me as well. Very, very aggressive pace. He took this fight on short notice.
Okay.
So I feel like that was one of the reasons he came out guns blazing, like, okay, this is my shot to finish the fight.
I see.
And it was a good strategy. It was really, really tough. I see another good knee to the body. And I became the wrestler with no wrestling background. I'm like, okay, let me try to take him down. You see he's clinching, throwing knees. Finally, once I got an underhook, this is one of my good takedowns here. I do like an outside trip. I was able to finally calm him down because, he was really, really aggressive on the feet. So, the fight goes. It's a whole, like 4 minutes or so that's we're gonna see here. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. I go for leg locks.
Oh, okay.
So it's nice. It's a good fight. But after this fight, or after this round, pardon me, you could see it. If you want to fast forward to the end of this round, you'll see the scenario happen. So it was a good fight. I encourage people to check it out. It was very exciting. Very, very fast paced. We're bantamweight, 135 pounds. That at the end, I'm going for a leg lock. I thought I was going to get him. So I put a lot of energy into applying this leg lock.
Right.
Finally get out. He goes for one himself. Round's over. I am exhausted here. I am so So you notice he's not getting up.
Yeah, he's even more.
And I didn't notice that at this point. So I'm putting my hands up like, how am I going to fight in this second round? I started looking over. I'm like, okay, is he tired? I was thinking about throwing a punch or two there.
Mm-hmm.
And so finally when I found out that, no, he's not getting up.
You were like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, there it is. That's more relief than happiness. So like, thank God there's no second round. That was basically what I was going through.
So you said this fight you trained the most for, right?
I did the most.
Why do you think you were so exhausted? Do you think you overtrained?
I think I overtrained. I think the strength and conditioning that we did was not sport specific. I think, again, if I was competing in CrossFit, I was ready to go. I was battle roping up a storm, tire flipping, sledgehammer on the tire. So I
Yeah.
was ready for the
So
CrossFit
it
games.
looked cool,
It
yeah.
looked great. I was physically, like, I remember my weigh-in picture for that. I looked like Bruce
You look great on that
Lee.
one, yeah.
Man, I thought I wasn't going to get tired all 3 rounds.
Mhm.
I was exhausted after this first round. So
Wow.
I really learned a lot about realistic training and sport-specific training. And at the time, strength and conditioning at this level for pro fighters was relatively new. So we're dealing with coaches who hadn't really worked with combat sports athletes for that long. So they were training us the same way they train a football player,
Yeah.
a track athlete, a
Yeah.
baseball player. They didn't really know how to train us fighters.
Yeah, so you were probably a little overtrained, I would
think
say,
so.
and you weren't doing more sport-specific things. And
Yes.
again, that goes along with what I mentioned before, which is training management. You know, managing your load,
Yes.
your loads, especially for a fighter, you want to peak at the right time, right? You don't want
Right.
to be exhausted going into your fight, where so
Absolutely.
so probably whoever that was, that coach, wasn't well versed in training for MMA and also managing, recovery and load. For you.
You're
at that
absolutely
time.
right. I remember in this fight, my calves were sore because several days before the fight, my strength and condition coach was having me do full on sprints. Like, we did one of the hardest workouts of the training camp, maybe several days before the fight. So I'm going into this fight sore. I didn't feel fresh. I felt fatigued. Again, I looked like I was in shape, and I was in shape, but I think overtraining was a big part of it.
Yeah.
At that time we were thinking you can't train enough, and the more you train, the better. And now I know that is not the case at all.
So let's say there was a second round in
Yeah.
that fight. What do you think you would have started doing
I
in the
would
start of the
have
second round?
attempted to clinch immediately and take him down, get top position, try to, be as heavy as possible, and until I gained some energy, and then I would have picked up the ground pound, maybe looked to pass guard. Sometimes staying in a fighter's guard is better, because when you pass the guard, that's when you're going to create a scramble.
Yep.
So you see fighters sometimes stay in their opponent's guard on purpose, because that's where you could really slow the pace down. Like, if you get mount, the fighter on bottom is going to move very aggressively to get out, because they recognize that it's such a bad position. Whereas when you're in their guard, they might think, oh, okay, maybe I'll land some elbows from here. Maybe I'll get my triangle choke that I always hit in practice. So you can slow that pace down a little bit. So I would have tried to do that, just recover for a minute. All I needed was a minute or so to recover.
Yeah.
And that minute break between rounds, that goes by so quickly. Like, it does not feel like, it feels like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I would have fought. I wasn't going to give up, but my arms were just dead. I was like, how am I even going to cover my face this round?
Man.
And it was mentally, that really hits you when
I was
you
going to ask
realize
about that. Yeah.
yeah, that you're fatigued. My confidence went from like a 10 at the beginning of the fight. I was like, I'm going to kill this guy.
Yeah.
To when I was fatigued, my
10
confidence
nothing.
probably like a 3.
Man.
Yeah, it's so, going back to your
Yeah.
question, building the perfect fighter, is endurance important? It is so important. To be able to set a high pace and maintain it, and know that you can maintain it for the duration of a fight, is such a confidence booster.
Yep. So we got endurance.
Yep.
We got mobility, flexibility. What else do you think we need for the perfect fighter?
So are we talking physical attributes?
Yeah, we'll
technical,
go
physical attributes first?
Physical first, then we'll go into
Okay.
more mental stuff. Yeah.
So we said mobility, we said endurance.
Yep.
I think, speed and power is amazing. If you have both,
Sure,
that's
yeah.
wonderful. So that right there, physically, you have a very, very capable fighter with those qualities, with
Okay.
those attributes.
Those three things. Let's go for mental stuff then now. Mentally, what do you think a fighter needs to be successful?
I think confidence is so important, and true confidence. Again, not delusion, not arrogance, not an overinflated ego. Real confidence that's built by training and finding success in training and competition you can't beat that. I mean, some fighters, they'll talk to you after the fight, when they face people like the John Jones, Anderson Silvas, they will admit after the fact that I knew I was done as soon as I walked in the ring. You just can tell that this person is supremely confident. You could feel that. You could feel, in weigh-ins, right before the fight's about to start, you could feel what level of confidence your opponent has. And when your opponent's confidence is far greater than yours, it's terrifying.
Do you have an example of when you felt like your confidence wasn't on your opponent's level?
I remember in my first amateur fight that we watched the last time I was here, I remember I thought, I felt like Superman. I'm 17 years old, super delusional about my abilities. And I remember when I saw my opponent, he was like nodding as if he like couldn't wait for the fight to start.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, why is he so eager? What does he know that I don't know? And that kind of messed with me a little bit. So sometimes that poker face, that just even if you don't have the skills to back it up, the confidence can really get in your opponent's head. So I think confidence in your abilities is best. That is such a factor in combat sports, because you need to know when you're in a bad spot or when you lose a round. You might lose the first 2 rounds. There's 1 round left. You still have to believe wholeheartedly that you are going to win this fight in the 3rd round. Where you see other fighters, they break as they lose. They mentally break. They think they can't win.
Yeah.
If you think you can't win, you're right. You're going to perform in that way, right?
Unfortunately. Yeah. Okay, so you got confidence. What else? What about like mental resilience? Let's say like nothing's going wrong in the fight. Like when you're super confident, but something's going wrong.
Right.
Like, how important is it to be resilient against, things that aren't going your way, would you say? Super important, I would think. Yeah,
super important. The mental aspect of combat sports can't be emphasized enough. It is so, so important. You will see mediocre athletes do very well because of, the things that we've talked about.
Yeah.
Again, this is not the NFL combine. You are not being judged solely on your physical capabilities. Fighting is very much about your confidence, your poker face, your ability to take a hard shot and not show that it has phased you.
Yeah.
I always tell my students, you could feel any way you want to feel. You could feel, oh man, that was a crazy punch. I don't know if I could take much more of that. But don't let your opponent know. Don't show it, right?
Right.
So the poker face is so important. The composure is so important. How you look between rounds, your body language. Are you like slumping? And, all of that is so, so important, because you might feel like you had a bad round, but then you look over in the corner, you see your opponent and their body language looks defeated. And you're realizing, okay, I can beat this person, right? So it's like a chess match mentally, right?
I was going to say, as a fan, you can see that, even through the TV, you can see, like you said, between rounds, somebody's just like, hands on knees, slouched over, just gasping for air.
Right.
And the other guy seems more like composed and ready to go. But it's definitely something you can see visually, even through the TV as a fan. But super important, yeah.
Very important.
Anything else the perfect fighter needs?
Coachability is so important.
Okay.
Being able to be coached and being able to adapt and adjust. Great fighters the greatest on the fly can change their strategy. The good fighters, they come in with a game plan. If it doesn't work, you see their confidence is shot and they break. They break mentally and their performance suffers greatly. Great fighters can change their tactics on their own once they have a certain amount of experience.
Okay.
When they're still up and coming, that's when you're coaching being coachable is so important.
Sure.
Not being stubborn, being able to adjust, being able to recognize that maybe your plan A isn't working, but you have plan B, plan C, plan D, and your coach is giving you advice. And if you could follow that, you see athletes that have great relationships with their coaches. It's almost like the coach is playing a video game. The coach will call something out, the athlete will respond immediately. So being coachable is probably one of the most important things from that side of things. Yeah, being able to listen, adjust, and adapt is so important. Such a chaotic sport like MMA, like boxing, like kickboxing.
Anything else, would you say? I always heard like longer limbs helps too.
It definitely helps, especially depending on your fighting style, right? Like reach, you can't teach reach, right? You can't teach. John Jones has the wingspan greater than heavyweights, right? At light heavyweight. That makes him tough to get past. He's going to kick your knees. He's going to poke you in the eye. He's going to extend his hand. Yep. So, yeah, reach is very, very important. And we see it now, a lot of long, lanky, lean fighters that don't look physically imposing but are some of the best fighters. Rodriguez, John Jones, right? A lot of these fighters that don't look intimidating as far as their physiques, but they are incredible fighters because of that reach. And that wiry Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley looks like he can't do a push-up, right? But he's one of the best fighters in the bantamweight division because he has that for that weight class. He has that reach. He knows how to use his reach. Long punches, long kicks, keeping people at bay. And that's another way to have a long career, is to keep people away from you so you're not getting hit as much. The fighters that love the firefight and that dramatic high-action fights, they tend to have exciting fights but much shorter careers.
That's why even Floyd Mayweather always said, the key is to, hit somebody, hit them, but not get hit. And people always kind of like, of course it's not fun to watch on TV because, maybe it seems like he's running, but, you're not trying to get hit. You don't want that in combat sport, because one hit and you're done.
That's it.
Can happen.
That's it.
But Floyd was very good at, defensively, footwork, all that stuff, getting away from his opponent. So I think that's super important too, is being smart,
Absolutely.
Range, controlling the distance, all that stuff.
You're right.
Whereas, who was it? I was watching someone's YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
I think DJ Demetrius Johnson. He
Oh,
calls it
yeah.
the void or something like that. Have you heard
Okay.
this?
I haven't heard him
I
talk
think
about that.
that's
No.
what he's referring to. But he would say, the void is in between, fighter A and fighter B to control
okay.
that void and manage it correctly. Close distance or get out of there fast.
That's such a great way of putting it. Another way, I forget another fighter that mentioned this. He says that the fighter who controls the space between the two people, right?
I think that's what DJ is.
Yeah, that's so true, and those are like the nuances of striking that you can't teach through just like jab, cross, hook kick, or jab, cross, low kick, right? These are the aspects of striking that a lot of coaches don't teach. They just teach you how to punch, but they don't teach you why you should throw the punch at what time, right? And that's really, really important. So yeah, controlling space, managing distance.
Yep.
These things are so important. Again, these are very managing distance isn't the, hey, today class, we're going to work on managing distance. You're not going to get an enthusiastic response from your students, but it's so important. It will pay off in the long run.
Footwork, distance, not the flashy stuff like we talked about.
Absolutely. That's fun. You add that to your game. Once your fundamentals are cemented and you have the fundamentals, that's when you could, one, break the rules. So I always tell my students, Muhammad Ali didn't learn how to box with his hands down. He learned how to box like everybody on the planet learns. Hands up, chin down, point your shoulder at your opponent, the same basics. Once he mastered those basics, he discovered he had such great reflexes and vision and footwork that he could kind of fight with his hands down to bait you so that he could counter. But you don't learn from day one how to fight that way. So the flashy stuff comes later. You have to earn the right to do the flashy stuff, in my humble opinion.
Gotcha. How long did it take you to learn the fundamentals, would you say?
I would say, so it depends on what fundamentals. Some fundamentals are easier to learn than others. So learning a jab, it's easy to learn a jab, but to master a jab, I don't think you'll ever master a jab. I think even the greatest boxers will admit, I have not mastered the jab, because that's how like high levels, this game is at this point. So I think it takes, let's say on average, it takes a solid 2 years of 5-6 days a week to get, and that
depends though, right? I mean, everybody's
on
different.
The athlete. Some people might take them 10 years. Some people might take them one. They're once in a lifetime talents. Maybe 1 year they have their fundamentals down, but that doesn't mean you stop working them, because they could always be sharper. Just because you know how to jab doesn't mean your jab is at its best, or it's the best that it's ever going to be. So I always tell my students, when they get bored with working the jab, working the rear naked choke, working on back control, working on, the clinch, working on throwing a push kick, I tell them that the greatest fighters, it's not they have techniques that you don't know. You know almost all the techniques that the greatest fighters know. They could just do them better than you. That's what makes them so good.
Yeah.
There's no secrets. Everything's out in the open, right? This idea of the mysticism behind martial arts, that's gone. Like I could poke you here and you're gonna pass out. Stuff that I heard a lot as a kid. Oh, the death touch, or there's a secret technique, or we can't teach this. It's too dangerous. Or I can't. My instructor can't fight in the UFC. He would kill people. It's like, well, have him go there and let him be a world champion. Exactly. So that stuff, thank goodness, is no longer. So we can see everything. We know what works, and we know that techniques done well, that's what works at the highest level.
Yeah. Anything else of the perfect fighter you think would have?
Man, in this day and age, being able to market yourself is important, because you might be there's a bunch of great fighters that are 25-0 in different parts of the world that we will never hear about, because either they or their management or whoever is not marketing them correctly. I am of the belief that the UFC champion at any weight class is not necessarily the best fighter in the world, right? There are so many fighters now. And we see fighters from the UFC go to like ONE FC and lose, right? We've seen that happen. So marketing is so important. So being able to talk, to promote yourself, to keep your fans interested in your day-to-day, your training, your life, your personal life. That's a big part of it now.
That's something we're learning too.
Yeah,
we're
right?
doing this right now. Like, this isn't something I've ever really done in my life, but having our own businesses is we have to tell people what we do. I'm the physical therapist. I help people get out of pain. You're the sports combat sports coach.
Right.
You help people learn how to fight and to defend themselves.
Right.
And it is a lot easier these days with, social media, with the internet. You could just, we could just do this, start talking about what we do.
Sure.
And hopefully somebody is like, yeah, let's, I could see Jerry for my knee injury, or I could go see Coach Ramy to learn how to better box.
Right.
But how do you, so if you have like a new prospective new person coming in and they're unsure about fighting in general, how do you, I don't want to say how do you convince them to, but how do you persuade them into like being like, hey, like this is what fighting is all about? Like what's your ways of getting them into your academy or into PSE?
No, great question. What I deal with the most is people coming in right away saying that they want to fight.
Okay.
And that is it's a tough, because you don't want to be a dream killer. You don't want to tell them, I've heard this 1,000 times and maybe 10 people have actually gone through and been able to do it. So I always tell people that's wonderful that you want to compete. Let's start out by training. Let's see how you like the training. Let's see if you could stay consistent. Let's see how you like sparring. Let's see how you like, this whole aspect, the tough aspect of combat sports training, sparring, dealing with not doing well in certain rounds. Some people can't take it mentally when they start training with people who are better than them or more skilled than them. They quit or they get discouraged. So you don't want to be a dream killer, but you also don't want to be like, oh yeah, you're definitely going to be a UFC champion. Come on in, here, sign up here. What's your credit card info, right? So, and then on the other hand, when people are tentative, it's the same strategy. Try it. You might be an amazing competitor and you might just not be aware because maybe traditional sports didn't work for you. I didn't know I was a good athlete because I never had an interest in traditional sports until I got into combat sports. And I discovered I was a good athlete. I just need to find the sport that was right for me.
Yeah.
So a lot of people come in not believing that they could be successful at combat sports, and they happen to do very, very well. So I always tell people, train first, see how you like it. If you could train, the training will take you someplace. You might end up being a coach. You might end up saying, this sucks. Let's go to pickleball. Let's do ping pong. Or you might say, wow, I love this and I want to focus on this. But the main thing is the training. See how you mentally and physically respond to the training aspect, and that will determine what you're capable of.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of pickleball, I've got so many pickleball injuries recently.
You're kidding me.
It's catching on everywhere.
No
pickleball.
way. What's the most common injury?
I've seen a lot of knee injuries with pickleball. I mean,
Really?
it could be whatever, but just people coming in or calling like, hey, this happened with pickleball. I was like, oh, okay.
Really? Do you tell them to make up a better reason for their injury and then come back to you after? Okay. No,
have you tried pickleball?
I have not. No, I have not.
Me neither, but I'm kind of intrigued by it now.
Maybe that's our next YouTube thing.
Should we do it?
Yeah, Dr. Jerry, Coach Ramy, try pickleball.
We suck.
I'm sure I'm going to be terrible. Yeah,
it looks kind of fun.
It does look fun.
Like
I've heard it's
crappy
fun.
Tennis or whatever.
That's it. Yeah. Less athletic tennis, right?
I shouldn't say
Shout
that.
out to all the pickleball players.
Or like, in between ping pong and tennis, you know what I mean, is pickleball. I would think, unless I'm way off, someone can just in the comments tell me like, hey, you're an idiot about pickleball, which is fine. I'm very not well-versed in pickleball, obviously. I'm learning more through patients that have, pain and they tell me about pickleball, but it's not my forte, that's for sure.
I see. Okay. Hey, I mean, any activity that people enjoy that keeps them active.
Say. I'm not trying to rag
jokes
on
are,
activity.
just trying
it's
to
just
joke.
I just don't know about it.
Right.
We poke fun at everything.
Yes,
so this is how we are. We're sarcastic people.
That's right.
That's what we do. Anything else? I mean, well, I think that's it. I mean, you want to plug everything again? We should talk about well, next time we'll talk about what I'm thinking in my head. But you want to plug all your stuff again?
Yeah, I'd love to. My academy's Phoenix Sports Empire.
That was fast. Sorry. It just goes by so fast.
That really went by very quickly.
Yeah.
I always have a good time chatting with you. And I received a lot of great feedback about you, about your show.
You're
about,
a superstar.
The studio. Thank you.
This guy's a superstar.
Thank you. Shout out to Enrique, who commented about my good looks.
Yes.
Great comment. Keep them coming. Hopefully people other than Enrique also comment on...
Very handsome man, Coach Ramy here. You're not single though, right?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
No.
I was going to say he's single, but you're not.
But still, keep the comments coming. You never know what's going to happen, right? So...
throw him your number in the comments. Yeah. No. Okay. So yeah, PSE.
Shout out to, anyone in the Lisle, Naperville area, the Chicago suburbs. If you'd like a good gym with coaches who care, please come to PSE. Shout out to my coaches who help PSE run, Coach Jaime, Coach Brooks, who helped me teach. Enrique, who we just mentioned, actually covered some classes for me while I
Oh,
was gone in
really?
Riyadh. So shout out to Enrique. Thank you for
Shout
your
out
help.
to you, Enrique.
Yeah, he's a super. We've mentioned
We
him
love
more
your
than anybody
comments.
now. Yeah, we love your
no,
comments.
he's the man.
I can't wait for
when
whatever
I first
he's
saw
gonna
the
come.
comment, I was like, oh, okay. You got a super fan,
Right.
which is fine. You know?
I'll take it. I'll
So,
take it.
Yeah. Anything else?
And my students, I have students competing March 9th. Many of them are making their competition debut. I'm really proud of them. We have Mina, Miguel, Aaron, Pete, Sophie, and Danny.
that's a lot of
6
people.
students. So last year when we went to this
Whoa.
competition, we had 1 competitor, Pete. 1 year later,
Whoa.
1 year later, we have 6.
Shout out to all of them.
It's just been organic. You know, I don't push competition on my students. They're the ones that want to compete and test themselves.
That's awesome. Good for
I actually
them.
have to like rein them in a lot. You know,
I was gonna, we can talk about that
yeah,
next time.
yeah,
how to
yeah.
slow
So,
people down. But
shout out to them, and you're doing great. I'm very proud of you. And yeah, shout out to Dr. Jerry for having me on.
well, thanks.
And,
Anytime.
no,
we'll
I
do it
really
again.
appreciate it.
Episode 3 with you, since you're the super famous guy that.
And yes, let's mention that our episode had the most views out
It's
of
at
all
299 right now. So if somebody else wants to watch for that extra 300,
Please, I've
that'd
been
be
getting
great.
recognized on the street.
Yeah,
Money just through the roof now.
Just
That's-
people. Yeah. But Instagram.
Ramy the Giant, and then my academy, Phoenix Sports Empire. Give me a follow if you have questions about combat sports. Even if you can't train at my gym, you're not in the area, you could hit me up.
Yeah,
I love
DM
training
us.
with people.
DM
yeah.
us. DM Coach Ramy about
Please.
combat sports training. DM me about pain injury stuff. My newsletter is the PT Handbook, so it's in my bio in my Instagram profile, which is at apt.g. But I send it out bi-weekly, so it's about just general ways to integrate physical therapy into your daily life. So it's a quick read. It's nothing crazy. It's free. So sign up for that. It's bi-weekly, like I said. Hit me up if you have any questions about pain and injury, like I said. And then thanks, bro.
Thaning you for having me. I
Appreciate
really
it.
appreciate it.
We'll
Thank
do it
you.
again.
Yes, sir. Can't wait.
Yep. Peace. We'll see you guys next time. Adios.